So now I'm just going to show you some more mobility exercises for the lower limbs. Again, some more hip openers and some for the hamstrings and around the hip area. And we're going to start with another variation of the seated twist, which we've already looked at for the neck and for the upper back, but this just brings in an element of hip mobility as well, which is quite nice. So again, if we start with our legs out in front of us, we'll take one leg across. So if I take the right leg across and aiming to get my right ankle towards my hip as close as I can, and I'm going to use this hand to just gently pull across. Now try and keep this hip grounded on the floor if you can, so that will just give you a little bit more isolated mobility through that hip. And you can take your arm, kind of support on your thigh, and just give a gentle pull across, and you should feel that through your hip. What you can do then is with your other hand, place it behind you, and as you pull with this arm to kind of give yourself that hip mobility, you can kind of allow yourself to twist around, follow with your head again, and it'll just add an element of spinal mobility and rotation along with the hip. And similar to before, if you can take a nice big deep breath in, as you breathe out, just try and stretch that little bit further, and just see if each time you take that deep breath you can get slightly further. Now if you're really flexible, what you can do is also bend the bottom leg, so it puts you in this kind of position. Again, trying to still keep that hip on the ground, and if you can, so if the hip raises, you're not going to get quite the same feeling out of it. So if you can keep that hip grounded at the same time having this one open, it just allows another element of hip mobility. And then again, you can just do a very similar thing and just kind of reach around with the other hand. And then you're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So crossing that leg, the left leg across the right leg. And this time I'm going to use my right hand to support that left leg and put my left hand behind me. And again, just try and reach around, sitting as upright as I can, following my head round, taking a big deep breath in, and then when I breathe out, just seeing if I can rotate that a little bit further. And again, if you want to bring in that other element with the leg bent, if you've got the mobility to do so, then that's absolutely fine. Again, if you haven't got the mobility or the stability to be able to do that, then that's absolutely fine. So the next one that we're going to look at is called, it's like a variation of the mobility exercise that we did previously, kind of on your front. So for the guys that can get that kind of feeling through the hip and push down, then great. But if you haven't got the stability or balance to do that, then the variation of that is to sit either in your day chair or on a hard back chair, legs down on your feet on your foot plate, and then you're going to lift one leg and pop it over the other knee. Now again, you can do it in sitting like this, or you can do it sat in your day chair. If you're doing it in sitting, you might just need something behind you to allow you to have the stability to sit as upright as you can, because that's going to allow a bit of extra hip mobility and just focus that even further. And then just use your hand really gently to kind of push down through that knee, and you'll feel the stretch down through the back of that hip, and just holding that for around 30 seconds or so. And again, you can kind of do this wherever you're sat comfortably and supported, really. And then in terms of opening out the hips and stretching out through the adductors, the muscles in the centre of the thigh, what we're going to do is we're going to pop our feet together in this position. And if you can hold that position, if you've got enough stability to do that, then great. If not, make sure there's something sat behind you. And it is quite a strong stretch if you're not that flexible like me. So what you can therefore then do is, again, just use the pillows that you have available to you to kind of prop them up either side of you, and it just makes it a little bit more comfortable, so you could sit in that position for a little bit longer. And in this position, then gravity will kind of allow the legs to fall out sideways, giving them more of a stretch, but the pillows will allow just a little bit more stability and comfort and allow you to sit in that position for longer. If you're not able to sit in this position, or you don't have the stability to do that, that's fine. The variation for that would be that you can simply do it with a single leg. So here, I'm looking to stretch the adductor on my right leg. I've got my right leg outstretched and my left leg bent to support that. And what we're going to do is we're going to lean down to the opposite knee. So I'm now going to lean down to my left knee, and I'm just going to take my hands with me and just support myself with my hands, and I can feel that in my adductor on my right leg. Again, hold that for around 30 seconds or as much as is tolerable, and only stretch as far as you feel that you can do. Again, if it feels uncomfortable, just ease back a little bit, and then once you kind of feel a little bit more comfortable, you can ease a little bit further. If you can't sit in this position or you can't bend that leg at the same time as you have your other one straight, then that's fine. You could just open out the legs into this position, and then again you can just lean down to the opposite side, like so. And if you wanted to add an element of spinal mobility in, then you can take this hand, support yourself with this hand on this ankle, and take this hand up and over. And again, you'll get a nice adductor stretch, but you'll also get a nice opening through the side of your chest at the same time, which is quite nice. So the next one we're going to look at is one for stretching out through the front of the hips, so the hip flexors. Again, spending a lot of time in sitting, these can get quite tight. And there's two ways that we're going to look at this. So the first one is going to be lying down on the floor. And if you've got some pillows handy, prop a couple of those, one on top of the other. Pop them on your mat in this position. And they want to sit under your lower back and at the top of your glutes, top of your bottom, and through the lower back. And then you want to lie over them into this position. And what you're going to do here is that's kind of put you in a position where your hips are off the ground slightly. You drop one leg down to the floor and then take this leg and pull it into your hand. And what you'll find is that you will feel the stretch through the hip flexor of the leg that's straight. And if you've got the ability and you've got the control to do so, push that leg down into the floor at the same time as you're pulling through this leg, and it will just give you more of an opening through that side of the hip. And then again, you can do the same thing on the other side. So lower that leg down, pull this leg up to your chest, and again, if you can do, push that hip down into the floor. So push down through the heel, push down through the back of the hip, and again, you should feel more of a stretch through the front of that hip flexor there. Now, if you haven't got the ability to do this, either because you haven't got the range in your hips or the control around the trunk and your hips, again, simply by doing the exercise that we did before of lying on your front and propping yourselves upon your hands would be a nice variation to that. Again, that will still open out the hip flexors in that position there. For those athletes that can and that have the control through the lower limbs, you can come into a lunge position. So come into this position here. In this position, we're going to stretch out the hip that we're kneeling on. And to do that, it's really important that you use the control around your pelvis and lower back to kind of tilt the pelvis backwards, which will automatically kind of give you a stretch through the front of your hip here. And then to make that even stronger, you can kind of then lunge forwards until you feel more of a stretch. Now, if you've added enough of that rotation through the pelvis backwards, you don't have to lunge too far before you can feel the stretch through your hip. So that's the crucial bit here. And then you can hold that as long as you can do, around 30 seconds or so. But make sure that you keep the glutes active, because that will allow you to keep the pelvis backwards and give a nice stretch through the front of the hip. And then you can do the same on the opposite side. So swap sides. Again, I'm going to tilt my pelvis backwards. Already gives me a nice stretch through the hip flexor on the left, and then I can just lunge a little bit further and feel that even more. Now again, if you've rotated that pelvis backwards enough, you shouldn't have to lunge too far before you can localise that stretch through the front of the hip flexor. And again, trying to hold that for around 30 seconds or so in that position. And then just to finish, we're going to do some nice hamstring stretches. Again, you can do this with a single leg or a double leg. Again, it depends on your ability and it depends on how comfortable it is. So you can either do it with one leg out in front of you and one leg bent, and essentially you're just trying to get your forehead as close to your lower leg as you can. And in order to make it kind of more isolated to hamstring, you can use your hands to support behind you, because if we allow too much flexion through the lower back, we won't get as much hamstring. It will be more spinal. So if we want more hamstring, use your hands to kind of prop you upright. So kind of keeping your back extended in a nice position, and then kind of lean yourself forwards without allowing yourself to fold. And by doing so, you'll get quite a strong stretch through the hamstring in order to do that. And only go as far as you can do, but keeping that back in a nice extended position and not allowing yourself to fold forwards. And again, you can do the same on the other leg. I like to use my hands to support me just because it gives me a bit more stability and allows me to get more of a hamstring stretch, keeps me upright as I then take myself folding forwards from my hips as opposed to through my lower back, and I can feel that through my hamstring. Equally, you can do the same thing with the legs out straight. So legs out in front of you, use your hands to support you, so you sat nice and upright, and then fold yourself forwards, and you'll feel that through the hamstring. If you're really not very flexible in that position, one thing you could do is use the books that you have, or a pillow, whichever, just to kind of prop underneath the back of your hips. And again, you might find that that helps you just get a little bit more stretch if you're not very flexible. That can be quite useful and just make it a little bit more comfortable as well.